Folks, we're going to get started.
All right.
And
4 times a day out of Iceland.
9:08.
Drive.
Let's all rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Who's this? You want to lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go around the room, recognize a quorum.
Linda Arman.
Frank Trotter.
Eustace Kromavicius.
James Massell.
Nancy Thomas.
Christopher Hahn. Jim Morgan.
All right, quorum is, we have a quorum, and Sam's team is here with us. Start with Susan.
Susan Blum, Chief Counsel.
Ken Krushansky, Senior Vice President of Health Sciences.
Ernest Baptiste, CEO of University Hospital.
Richard Reeder, Vice President for Research.
Matt Whalen, Vice President, Strategic Initiatives.
Dexter Bailey, Vice President for Advancement.
Kathy Byington, Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration.
Judy Griman, Chief Deputy President and Senior Vice President for Government and Community Relations.
Michael Bernstein, Provost.
Carol Randall, Executive Assistant.
Rachel Kavanaugh, Executive Assistant to the Chief Deputy President and Senior Vice President for Government and Community Relations.
Gotta shorten these
Marissa
titles.
Trachtenberg, Associate Director of Policy Compliance and Presidential Initiatives.
Kevin Moriarty, Chapter President for Stony Brook University's UUP.
I'm Andrew Machkasov, fourth year mathematics student and senator for the undergraduate student government.
Thank you. And Nancy? Did you already say?
Nancy Thomas, President of the University Senate.
Very good, Nancy. Thank you. And Sam, always appreciate having your team here. One, it always shows respect for the council to have your team here, and whenever issues come up, you have them right here to answer our questions. So guys, I know you have a million other things to do, but we do appreciate it, so thank you. Don't have a whole lot on the agenda and promise to get you out early, which always is a smile for Chris and Jim. But I have a couple of things, but let's do the approval of the minutes from December 10th, 2018. Judy, said there were no substantive changes. A couple of typos were found over the weekend, but the ones in your hard copy package are the accurate ones. Motion by Linda, seconded by Chris. Any comments, revisions, additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Brief chairman's report. A couple of things to mention. With my LIA hat that relate to Stony Brook, we were very honored to have Chancellor Christina Johnson. A couple of weeks ago, a couple of the council members made it, including Hustis. So James, did you make that one too?
Yep.
Great. I hope you enjoyed. It was just exciting to hear her talk about what her visions for SUNY and her, her very quick affection for Stony Brook and the other Long Island SUNYs and our community colleges, and the fact that she's an engineer and really into energy, I think bodes well for Stony Brook. And so it was great to have her come down. Then last week, we did an event on artificial intelligence and how we best position Long Island to take advantage of that growth in what that sector or that industry that's going to impact all of our lives, whether we are ready for it or not. It already is. And so we had somebody from, a brilliant woman from Brookhaven National Lab, somebody here from Stony Brook, somebody from the engineering school at Hofstra, and then somebody from ULC Robotics, a robotics company in Hauppauge. And what I've loved about the program was to really understand the amazing talent that's here on Long Island and in our research institutions, where it really makes you feel excited about the future, that we definitely have the brain power in this region and the assets to position Long Island well for what's hopefully will be a burgeoning industry. So that was cool. And then Friday, we hosted the governor at the Crest Hollow for a quick event where we had, we put up 400 chairs. I hear there was over 600 people there. And so it was standing room only. And he plugged Stony Brook 3 different times, including highlighting the iDine building that we funded out of the Transformative Investment Program. And then he talked about the research corridor that we're trying to create here from BNL to Feinstein and beyond into the city, and again highlighted Stony Brook as a key component of that. And then he mentioned Stony Brook again. Sam, I don't remember what it was, but I do remember hearing Stony Brook 3 times. So it was good. So to have the Chancellor highlight in Stony Brook and to have the Governor highlight in Stony Brook, I think bodes well for the institution. And that is all I had to share in my Chairman's report, and I'll hand it over to Sam now for his President's report.
Thank you. So thank you, Kevin. And, again, those were exciting events. I had the chance to go to the Chancellor's event, and it was very well attended. There was lots of great questions for her. And unfortunately, I was out of town on Friday for the Governor's event, so I don't know the third thing that Stony Brook has done either. But it's wonderful that we were brought up, and I think again, it's a testimony to the outstanding work our faculty, students, and staff are doing at the university. So I want to begin with some issues and some reports on leadership, and the first is that it's with some sadness, but also bittersweet feelings that I announced that our provost and senior vice president for academic affairs, sitting right here, Michael Bernstein, will be leaving Stony Brook really for personal reasons at the end of this academic year. And Michael has done outstanding things. He'll be completing 3 years at the end of that time. He came in at a time of great difficulties for the university in terms of our budget. He's made extraordinary progress in improving that, but also has really had an amazing commitment to academic rigor at the university. He's someone who knows quality, having worked at a number of AAU institutions, and he's brought that interest in making sure that Stony Brook maintains that kind of academic rigor in everything we do. And that's challenging sometimes to remind people that we are an AAU university. We do have standards, and Michael's worked really hard to do that. And so I just want to thank Michael publicly for everything he's done. I'm really pleased that we're not saying goodbye yet. I'm pleased that I have him till the end of this semester, so that's fantastic. And he's going to continue as the provost with full powers thereof. But we beginning a search. Some of you in this room may be involved in this search. I know Kevin is part of it, and others are engaged as well. And we have 2 outstanding faculty members, Esther Takeuchi, who has appointments both in the College of Arts and Sciences and the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences, will be one chair, and then Dave Ferguson, who has been involved in a number of searches, who's in technology, science and technology in the Department of Engineering, will be the other chair, co-chair, and we've assembled, I think, a great and diverse group of faculty to be engaged in this search, as well as some of the senior leaders of the university. So we already have named that search committee. We're in the process of looking for a search firm to perform that search. And Nancy is going to be a part of it, for example. Thank you. But we're very excited about it, and again, we're hopeful that we will find an outstanding candidate to be provost at Stony Brook University. Rick Cateau, who has been working as the interim dean of students and vice president for student affairs, again through a national search, is now been appointed to have that role on a non-interim basis. Rick did an outstanding job as an interim. He's had a great career, most of it at Stony Brook University in student affairs in the related areas, but really stepped to the plate as interim, and I think did a remarkable job as making some changes that needed to be made there, even in an interim role, but at the same time gaining the confidence of all of the people who work there in his abilities. And so we're very excited about Rick doing this dual role. And I think, again, I look forward to great things coming from student affairs under Rick's leadership. June Liu, who's been doing great work for us in our area of global affairs. This is area really managing Stony Brook's outreach to the world. So this is things like student exchange programs, it's things like affiliate programs, including areas around research with partner universities. And it's also in the recruitment of international students as well, which is an important component of what Stony Brook is doing. And so because June's portfolio is so broad now, we gave him a vice presidential title. So he does have a title within the provostial office. We've given him a title now of vice president for global affairs at Stony Brook. And again, he'll continue his important work in that area. And then, again, bittersweet news, after 18 years, Jakob Shamash, in the role as Vice President of Economic Development, Jakob Shamash will be stepping down from that role and eventually returning to the faculty in the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Jakob has done extraordinary things over that time. I think if you look at the R&D park, you can see really a strong monument to Jakob's efforts with working with our elected officials, and particularly Senator LaValle, Senator Flanagan, and others, to bring really a lot of opportunities for Stony Brook to improve what we do and really create an ecosystem in economic development. With Jakob's departure, I've made the decision to integrate economic development into the Department of Research, into our Vice President for Research office. This is the construct for most universities in the country. Most AA universities have economic development as a component of research as opposed to a separate entity. I think frankly, when Jakob was Dean of Engineering, that line between economic development and the research enterprise was not so strong. There weren't really boundaries between them because, of course, there was this, he was the Dean of Engineering at the same time, so there was free flow. I think once I and the provost made the decision that he wasn't going to be Dean of Engineering, he was going to step down in that role, I think that we created more of a barrier between economic development. So the purpose of this is not to downplay the importance of economic development. In fact, I think it's to accelerate its relevance at Stony Brook. The reason that what generates economic development primarily at Stony Brook is things related to the work that goes on from our faculty, the work that goes on from our students, the cutting-edge research that's going on. At the same time, it's the availability of our faculty for companies as well, to serve as consultants, to be on the board of companies. So it's not just the startup companies we develop, but that's important, but it's faculty engagement in the whole enterprise and getting involved with companies as well. So I think having this under research is going to break those barriers down between economic development. I think we've moved some of the workforce components to areas around education, which makes more sense in some areas. So I think overall you're going to see us strengthen this. And we will be doing some reorganization, and Rich will talk in much more detail about that, so you'll get more of a view of his vision for how this will function in a new role going forward, and that's on our agenda today. But I wanted to let you know some of the thinking behind it. And then we have an interim dean now for the School of Journalism. Michael appointed Laura Lindenfeld, who's professor of journalism and executive director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, to serve now in the role as interim dean of the School of Journalism.
Was that the woman who made a presentation
It
to
is
us last
indeed.
time?
It is indeed same person, and so she will be taking on that role, and then we'll be doing again a national search for a new dean in our School of Journalism. And then Lee Bitsoy, who had been our Chief Diversity Officer, CDO for the university, is stepping down to pursue new opportunities. And Jarvis Watson, who some of you may know, who's been active in our Student Affairs program, particularly in areas related to diversity, is going to step up now as the interim CDO. And again, we'll begin a national search for a Chief Diversity Officer, probably using a search firm to do this because this is a very competitive area right now to find people. We want to make sure we bring in and have an outstanding one, although I'm sure we have strong internal candidates as well. So those are really kind of the personnel changes. Judy will talk about the state budget and what's in it for Stony Brook. I just want to spend and kind of tell you my view. And remember, and this of course is the proposed budget, of course. The one thing I want to emphasize is that there is some help for Stony Brook in terms of what's proposed by the governor. There's some help with us with retroactive components of our contractual salary increases. You may recall we talked about the contractual salary increases, and there's two retroactive components, one's from 16-17, one's from 17-18. So there's an accelerated payment model in that new budget which would cover the 16-17 retroactive components for us. That would be great. That really helps us our budget. But the overall delta, if you take all contracts for us this year in terms of what we owe this year compared to what we owed last year, is $33 million. So that retroactive component is about $9 million roughly of that. Yes.
More like 13.
More like 13? Okay, so retroactive component is, were you counting the lump sum?
Yes.
Okay, so if you count the lump sum, then it's 13. So that's a big deal if that gets covered. Whatever if that gets covered will help us. So that takes it, depending on how you do your math, that'll either take it to $24 or $20 million in terms of what our delta is. But they're still both very big numbers. So whether it's 24 or 20, I want you to understand that whatever's in there is helpful but doesn't solve our fiscal problems completely. So I just want to put that in perspective. We can talk more about it during Judy's presentation, but we've worked really hard, and so we've taken literally $20+ million out of our spend on an annual basis. That's non-personnel spending. We've taken about $20 million out of our spend. So we've done what we can to deal with this. And we've had a hiring hold in place, and we have literally hundreds of employees that were down because of that hiring hold. So there's a number of things we've done. But I want you to understand that from the beginning, that what's in the budget is helpful to us. But that doesn't mean we won't be advocating for more, essentially, as we go forward. We can talk more about that as we get through it. And then I think there's a number of faculty accolades in here that I encourage you to take a look at, because they're doing some great things. Advancement has a number of updates as well, with some major gifts that have come in. Again, I thought it's going well. One of the things that Stony Brook faculty do, and it's really almost selfless, is that they mentor high school students in this area, particularly for the major scientific competitions. Now Regeneron is one of the major ones. And once again, Stony Brook had a finalist among these Regeneron competitions. So again, on page 7 of your report, you can see that Ahmad Perez, who's a Brentwood High School student who was mentored by Sharif Abdelaziz, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, was one of the finalists in the Regeneron Talent Search. And again, this is something they do, it's mentoring high school students is challenging. Let me tell you again, they're incredibly enthusiastic, they're really smart, but they often don't know a lot about being in a lab, don't know a lot about doing scientific experiments. So it's a labor of love, really, by our faculty to take these students on and give them an opportunity in their laboratories. But the results have been incredible. These are really bright students, they work really hard, and they've turned out, in many cases, some great research. So we had a number of semifinalists, and we did have one of the finalists coming from Stony Brook. And nationally, we're one of the top schools in the country in terms of this mentoring and helping people do this.
It was great to see you from Brentwood High School.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. And so then, I don't have, there's a few things in athletics update which I encourage you to read. Both the men's and women's teams are playing well in basketball. I encourage you to come out and watch. Our women's lacrosse team is number 5 in the nation in all major preseason polls. So again, we're anticipating an exciting year for them. And so I'll stop there and answer any questions people have.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Great report. Always great to get an update on all the cool things that are happening here with both the students and the faculty and your team. I had the privilege of being on the search committee that selected Michael, and I will not forget the interview we did via FaceTime. What was it? Skype. Oh, we Skyped it. Okay, but it was great. Even from 3,000 miles away, we knew he was the right person for the job. And we thank you for your service, and we'll miss you. And as Sam said, Glad will be seeing you for the next couple of months, and we'll see you probably at our last May meeting. For the year. So we'll say goodbye then, not today.
Yeah.
So thanks, and Rick, it was a great appointment. Rick's he's not here today, is he? No, but he's great, and another great appointment.
Yep.
So congrats on all that.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Sam on anything? No? All right. Hearing none, thank you, Sam. We'll go right to, we have 2 reports today, I told you. We're going to get you out early today. Judy is going to give us an update on the governor's budget.
Which is, to some extent, more of a work in progress than it might otherwise. So for those of you who might have seen some of this presentation at a university council, there are different slides at the end because things have changed in terms of the revenue for the state. So the theme of the governor has themed generally every year. This is really the justice agenda. I'd say the chambers, now that it's a Democratic Senate and a Democratic Assembly, are on the move to try and be as progressive as possible, and you'll see many of the things have already been passed. So this is a kind of a list of some of the items that are within the governor's budget proposal that what I call more sort of social issues. Some have money components attached to them, and many do not. And several of these have actually already been passed. They've already passed the stronger abortion rights law, election reform, the Dreamers component, which is making college aid available to Dreamers. So the legislature is right out there, sort of in front of, in some cases, and walking hand in hand with the governor on some of these issues. The overall budget itself is, as it was proposed a few weeks ago, $176 billion budget includes a 2% spending increase. At that time, they were projecting about a $3 billion gap, and they closed that gap within the context of that proposed budget through some limited spending, holding state agencies flat, continuing the millionaire's tax, closing a loophole on the internet sales tax. So they knew, this was a few weeks ago, that there was going to be some kind of a gap, and they did some minor tinkering, I would say, although not everybody would call $3 billion minor, but some tinkering to make sure that the budget that was proposed was in balance. At the time of the announcement in January, personal income taxes were down by about $500 million from last year's projections. That's changed, and we'll get to that in a little bit. As I get into some of the numbers, what everybody needs to remember is that this is the governor's proposal. That deadline is April 1 to actually pass a final budget where, the governor and the two chambers agree on something. So I often, when I do this, have people then contact me after to say, well, how do I get into that piece of money? It's a proposal. It is not a passed budget yet, which also means that there's moments where we can have some impact. So in terms of revenue and economic development, one of the big issues is making permanent the 2% property tax cap, which has certainly become kind of the rally point for some of the legislators on Long Island. The governor has focused quite a bit on the SALT issue, so this really came out of the change in the federal tax, and is, I think, as you'll see a little bit later, one of the biggest drivers of New York's lack of early tax revenue right now. So this SALT issue is really having the impact that I think that the governor and others thought it would have. There's money for the REDCs, there's money for this high-tech innovation and economic development infrastructure fund, and there's also a reconstitution of the innovation network to focus on AI and quantum computing. It's not funded. ESD manages that network, and SUNY is sort of checking in to see where can SUNY institutions play within that. There is significant infrastructure spending proposed in the governor's budget, $150 billion for what he called the nation's largest infrastructure program over the next 5 years. This adds to the infrastructure, very significant infrastructure work that's been done over the last couple of years in terms of the Cuomo Bridge, mass transit, the new subway line, LaGuardia Airport. So, he has really made some of the infrastructure, major infrastructure changes key to the last term, and certainly this signaled this term. Somebody's calling me. For environmental spending, I added this because some of these very same things, so there's a Green Future Fund, supports clean water, renewable energy, clean transportation, open space. Many of these are things that our researchers are very involved in. And so it's of particular interest, I think, to Stony Brook that we pay attention to this to see what may or may not be available to some of our researchers.
Hey Judy, on the prior page, you skipped over what I thought was a very important bullet. Unless you're saving it for later, $13 billion to maintain SUNY and CUNY buildings. Is there a breakdown of that? Do we get a particular piece of that, or is it a competitive thing, or?
There isn't much information about that, but I think it's actually some of what's already being done.
And is it 1.3 billion or 13 billion? 13 billion?
But I think that it's much of what's sort of already in the queue. So not much other information about that.
Got it.
It's highlighted as part of the 150 billion, but I think that much of it is what's already in the queue. And we'll get to some of the capital, SUNY capital, in a minute.
There's all maxim in government. When you have good news, say it often. So.
Right. So again, I think that some of the environmental spending is really of particular interest to some of our areas of research, both in SOMAS and in engineering. Education and healthcare. So the K-12, which has seen fairly significant increases over the last few years, the governor includes $1 billion education aid increase, but does some changes the distribution. So there's a redistribution of the foundation aid to the neediest schools. Advocates had been seeking, even more advocates had been seeking about a $2 billion increase. They've gotten very significant increases over the last several years, unlike higher education. But so we'll see where that goes. It's obviously one of the largest parts of the budget, and with the budget having some stress, I don't know that they'll be able to increase that billion or even necessarily hold on to that billion. Overall, healthcare spending was increased. The New York State Affordable Care Act was codified. So a lot of what the governor is doing in this budget is taking some of the issues that are happening at the federal level and embedding them into New York's statutory framework. There's money to fight the opioid epidemic, and this last required study on nurse staffing, there's been an issue about nurse staffing. That particular study, I think, is important to Stony Brook Hospital. We'll be monitoring that and hopefully engaged in that. You know, there's a lot of heat on both sides of this issue about nurse staffing, and I think that they wisely said what most legislators say: when there's a lot of heat on both sides, let's do a study and see where it turns out. Higher education. So again, the governor called for passage of the DREAM Act, and the chambers have done that. It extends TAP and Excelsior to Dreamers. There's the final phase-in of Excelsior, which takes it up to $125,000 income. One of the things that SUNY had asked for, and frankly we at Stony Brook think is really important, is that they, what I'll say is fix the cohort of the Excelsior program in terms of who gets a tuition increase. So Excelsior tuition is frozen for 4 years, and then at 4 years it goes up, and then it's frozen for 4 years. It's not frozen for the student coming in. So it creates a big cliff. So for example, if Eustace comes in this year, it's not that his tuition is frozen for 4 years and James comes in the next year and his is frozen. It's that the program was frozen for 4 years. And so the institutions obviously don't get that revenue, but it will create a cliff at the end of that 4 years. And so the question will be, does the institution essentially eat the difference, or does the state fund it? And SUNY SUNY recommended a fix of this. They didn't include that fix in the budget. They included the movement up to $125,000 and some money that connects to that, but not a fix of the tuition increase. Another significant piece in the governor's budget is the For-Profit College Accountability Act. It looks at, it has certain requirements to demonstrate that they're not receiving more than 80% of their revenue from tax dollars, that they have to spend at least 50% of their revenues on instruction, report the salaries of presidents and senior leadership, or lose access to TAP funding for new students. So there's some pretty significant requirements to monitor and regulate those institutions, which have had some significant problems in terms of
and it's worth saying that this is something that's taking place in a backdrop of a Department of Education in the United States that is doing exactly the opposite, that is really working to loosen regulations on for-profits. Some, I think, common sense things that were being done during the Obama administration now would be lifted essentially in what's being proposed by the Department of Education. And so major groups and now Congress, I think, are watching this with great interest on what's happening in terms of the regulation. And just to, again, state something that may be obvious, that a significant proportion of the issues around debt and indebtedness of students are directly related to for-profit colleges. Not all of it by any means, but a significant portion of it is related to for-profit colleges, and really irresponsible decisions about asking students to get loans and then really not doing anything to ensure their success, essentially. For some of them, not all, again, just general comment.
But sort of an industry, the industry as a whole has had these kind of issues.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, as you noted, this is really another one of the elements woven into this budget in which New York is saying, thanks federal government, we don't like what you're doing, and so we're going to make sure that we're doing it in the way that we think makes sense. This is definitely one of those. For SUNY overall, and I'll get into how this impacts Stony Brook, as Sam noted, provides the increase to mitigate 1 year of the UUP retro increase. That's critically important to us. And the second year of the retro increase is due to our employees in July, so after this budget. And so our hope would be that in the next budget, that second component would come in. They're essentially paying us back, because we've already made this retro payment to our employees. Of particular importance right this minute, given that the state is experiencing some budgetary problems, is that it does continue what we call the regular MOE. And that's that during SUNY 2020, one of the key components was that the state couldn't cut the budgets of SUNY. And so the difference between regular MOE is called enhanced MOE, is that what we all thought was that also meant that they would provide us with revenue for things like contractual increases, salary increases. And that was one of the surprises during SUNY 2020 was that didn't happen. But at least it sets a foundation from which they're not supposed to cut, and that was continued in the governor's budget.
Hey Judy, refresh our recollection on, or at least mine, predictable tuition. Is that the new name for SUNY 2020, and what actually does predictable tuition mean?
It means that, so during SUNY 2020, it was up to $300. The SUNY had the ability to increase tuition each year by up to $300. When 2020 ended, there was a year of no tuition increase, and then sort of this predictable tuition bill passed, which is that SUNY can pass up to $200 for 4 years, and we're in the, I believe, we're in the second year of that 4 year.
And it's optional.
SUNY has the right to pass it or not.
Oh,
So-
SUNY has to. We can't just do it on our own.
No.
Remember at the last meeting, folks, I told you I go to that once a year with all the other SUNY chairs. A lot of the upstate SUNYs, they don't want any tuition increase because they can't attract students, they're losing students, and so they feel like that's an impact, whereas we have bigger challenges and the need for the revenues and the increase. And so I can see how SUNY debates the overall decision because some of the upstate campuses do not want it.
Which they do, and I think that SUNY, and I actually think that some legislators are sort of in a clearer way understanding the differences between running an AAU research institution and a comprehensive institution. There are very different cost structures. And so I think that they're understanding that. It doesn't mean that currently the tuition component can reflect that. It's one or none. One of the significant things that's included in here is not included with a dollar added to it, which is the Prodigy program. It allows SUNY to hire up to 1,000 new underrepresented minority faculty over the next 10 years. This is one of the key programs of the Chancellor. She talked about it a little bit at the LIA event. It's called Promoting Retention and Opportunity for Diversity, Inclusion, and Growth. The Chancellors call it a partnership among the system, the campuses, and donors. And there is some money within SUNY that she may use, but I think that she will be sort of putting together the package of how to fund this. And she's already put together, or I think soon to put out an RFP to campuses to help us to understand how do we get access to that money to bring people to this campus. Another very significant thing is that the governor's proposing requiring Office of the State Controller pre-approval for contracts above $250,000. This has a significant, and if they're not approved within 30 days, it would be deemed approved. This has a significant impact on how we purchase, all kinds of things, x-ray machines, all kinds of things. And we have worked frankly against this in the past, and I think that SUNY has been working to outline for the comptroller just how difficult this makes our lives. They have post-audit approval. They have post-purchase audit authority. And so the question is, let's see where this goes, but there's there's quite a bit of concern about this one.
Has there been any egregious examples of the post-audit whacking a SUNY campus?
It's kind of analogous to.
None that I'm aware of.
Nor me, if it isn't broken.
I mean, it's possible the comptroller has some, I don't know.
We had flexibility for many years, and it was just rescinded last spring.
Right. So that's one of the key ones. Again, this the cut 16.5 in legislative add-ons. Legislative add-ons are each year the governor tends to cut certain things. EOP, attain. So in this case, actually, there were 2 grants to Stony Brook. One is in Algonquin languages and the other is in Italian studies. Generally, the legislature puts those, not the Stony Brook ones, but puts back the EOP cut, puts back. I think most people assume that they will do that again, but those aren't in there. From a Stony Brook perspective, just looking at operations and capital, again, the retro salary increase covered 1 year, quite helpful, so we still have the gap as Sam noted. Predictable tuition continued, quite helpful. The CATs and the COEs, again, this is usually part of the governor proposes a low number, legislature puts in a higher number, and so I think there's a big CATs and COE lobbying day, I think it's tomorrow, along with the student lobbying day tomorrow. It's going to be a very busy Capitol tomorrow, but I think that they'll push it back up. The most important thing I'd say for us is that we're working very hard to get an increase in base aid between now and April 1st, or to fix the TAP gap. So, SUNY has not seen an increase in base aid for about 10 years. The state does pay our benefits, and so as those have increased, absolutely the state has put money into increasing those benefits. But in terms of the base aid for running the campus, that hasn't increased, and so we have been making that case. I know that our students are going up there tomorrow to make that case. UP is making that case. Sort of all hands on deck are making the case that even though this is a difficult budget time, we need to support SUNY and CUNY. The TAP gap is the highest TAP level set for about 2010, 2011 amounts. And so the institutions make up the difference between that tuition and today's tuition. Stony Brook is about $9 million. And so that's another significant place where the state could actually put some money in, which would help actually every institution across the state. And so we've certainly talked to legislative leaders about that. In terms of critical maintenance, Stony Brook got this year about $23 million that goes directly to us. The rest goes into a pot at SUNY for which we compete. Last year we got about $49 million directly to us, and so we already are certainly out there pointing out to SUNY that we need more than $23 million to keep a campus this size and this age in good shape. On the hospital side, one of the most significant things last year, you may remember, and I know that Ken and Ernest remember, the governor, there was a cut of $78 million in operating funds from the 3 hospitals. They found a sort of one-shot way to cover that. That one shot is over. And so the budget this year does not include sort of an add back of that operating. There is conversation going on between SUNY and the DOB about other ways to assist our budget. There may be some help in debt service, for example, but those are ongoing conversations. As the budget stands as proposed right now, there is no pickup on that operating fund. Important is the dish cap was raised to provide 100% match to federal dish funds. That's been in question over the last couple of years, and so that's a good thing. We're not fighting that fight around getting reimbursed for care that we've already given to underserved patients. And we maintain $670,000 in funding for the NCI application. This is we're on a sort of 3-year march to getting a National Cancer Institute designation for the Cancer Center, and we will be working we are working to increase that to at least $1 million, if not more, at least for the next 3 to 4 years.
Just a point about that spending authority, lest anyone think that's actual money. That just means we're allowed to spend the money we take in.
Right, right. So here's the difference between my presentation a few weeks ago and now is that there's new problems on the horizon. So what's the looming issue? A $2.8 billion drop in state income tax revenue is what they're now projecting. And as the governor said, at this point, there's no doubt that the budget we put forward is not supported by the revenues. It's as serious as a heart attack. And so what he's saying is he will likely put out a revision of the budget that I've just gone through. Given that the biggest spending areas now are education, healthcare, infrastructure, phasing of the middle class tax cut, those are the places where you'll see some action, but those are also the places where there's significant lobbying. The governor has a very short time to submit his recommendations for changes, and then it just gets into the mix between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor to have the final conversation. The 2017 tax cut legislation at the federal level is what people think is prompting this, and it's that New York's wealthiest taxpayers are changing their legal residence to avoid this federal tax hit. And New York's economy relies on these high earners, right? And so the behavior of just a few thousand can have a significant impact on state revenues. As an aside, when I was in Connecticut working for the Connecticut Budget Agency, Connecticut was having a very difficult year, which has never stopped. But there was one year where one person in Greenwich passed away, and the estate tax closed the budget gap. So when I saw that New York relies on a few thousand high earners, that's the truth. It's a few thousand high earners.
The governor on Friday, he used a stat. The first time I heard it was really telling. What do we have, about 17 million people in the state of New York? 93,000 taxpayers pay over 55% of the revenues to the state. So 93,000 out of 17 million make up over half the revenues to the state. And they're mobile, or they can be mobile. So I think that's a pretty telling statistic.
Right, exactly. And it's easy to be mobile, right? I mean,
Right.
So, they already have properties elsewhere, so it's not that complicated to switch your residence. So, this is really, I'd say, over the next week or so, we'll see whether and what the governor's going to propose to close the gap. And then following that, you'll see the entire month of March will be a pretty crazy time. The one thing that I would say is, in spite of that, we still have a message here, right? And so our message here is going to continue to be that SUNY and Stony Brook particularly, and the two AAU institutions, Stony Brook and Buffalo, actually need support. And haven't received the kind of support that we've needed from the state. We've received it from our students, but we haven't received it from the state. And so we will continue to work on that. And
I mean, the challenge is always how to get that message out in the most effective way. The ROI is extraordinary. So if you look at how much the state is putting in and the economic impact of the university, these calculations are always kind of fuzzy, but it's over $7 billion is the most recent one we've had from our economist, who's fairly well respected. So John Murphy. So I think
That's just for Stony Brook.
that's just Stony Brook. That's just Stony Brook in this region in the state is $7 point some billion total economic impact. I mean, just in terms of as we're the largest single-site employer. When you factor in our extraordinary healthcare enterprise, we're about a $3 billion in revenue yearly organization. So a little more than that. So it's a huge impact. And again, the money the state's putting in really gets repaid in multiple different ways. And that ranges from the workforce we generate, our extraordinary students, most of whom stay in New York, to the companies we start, which have been extraordinary. Which have generated incredible wealth. One in particular has generated extraordinary wealth, and those people who are still living in New York are helping pay those taxes. And so there's so many different ways in which Stony Brook has impacted the region. The invention of MRI, I mean, you can go on and on, but the point is that this is one area, and particularly, I think, research-intensive universities like Stony Brook, like Buffalo, really punch above their weight in terms of what they do for the state. But it's hard to get that message out and get people to really, easy for people to kind of take for granted the university and not recognize sometimes all it's doing for the state. And unfortunately, the state money is really important to us. That state allocation is very important to us. And really our alternative is always to raise tuition and fees for the universities. We don't have a lot of leverage besides that. As we grow research, we get more money, but research actually is a cost for us as well. The research we do actually generally costs us a little more than the money we get to pay for it. So, it's not, we don't make money on research per se. The benefits are extraordinary for us, but we don't make money on it. So it really is a challenge, and I think we've been trying to get that message out. But as Judy said, they cut the state allocation beginning around 2007, and it reached its nadir in 2010, and it's stayed there, 2010 and 2011, and stayed there ever since. So, it's never gone up since then. So.
Sam, if I could suggest to Judy, so the governor's budget amendments come out, he gets 21-day amendments, he gets 30-day amendments, and so it's likely that those amendments will not make the situation any better, that Judy just went over. Then the budget has to be adopted by April 1st by the legislature and the governor. So there's an opportunity in March, throughout March, to advocate. If once we know what the governor's budget amendments are, perhaps you could just give us a page of talking points and bullets. So I think it's incumbent upon us as council members, when we're talking to our Senate, representatives and our delegation, to always be also advocating. So Albany is not just hearing from folks at Stony Brook.
So who is the Senate's chair of the higher education department?
Toby Stavisky
Out of Queens.
out of Queens.
That's what I was just going to ask. How does the changes in the Long Island delegation, in addition to the leadership of committees that affect us greatly, how's that going?
So I think
That's like
I
starting
think
over
we've
again
had
in many
some
ways.
great conversations, and I want to thank Kevin actually for making a number of introductions. He's done a great job in introducing us to a number of the new senators from Long Island, and we've already had, I think, some very productive meetings. We're going to have one of them again out to campus very soon. A couple of them have Stony Brook connections, so one is alum, one has a degree from Stony Brook as well. So there are some connections, which is good. And I think one of the people who's been the leader, Senator Kaminsky, has already come to Stony Brook a couple times, has met with me, has met with others, and I think has been very receptive to listening about what our needs are, and I think understood very quickly kind of what our challenges are and what's needed to address them. So I've been impressed by those conversations, and how in this current budget system that transfers to action is another question, but clearly they've been wanting to listen, they wanted to understand, and I think Kevin has done a great job of reminding people that Stony Brook is a Long Island asset, so it's not just a Suffolk County asset or a Three Village asset. It's a Long Island regional asset. You know, many of our students come from NASA. Many of our employees live in NASA, and you know, NASA benefits from a lot of the things we do. So it's not just a Suffolk County asset. And I think getting that message out again has been important.
Is that a hard sell,
Kevin's been
Kevin,
really
when you do that?
important.
You know,
I'm
to-
sorry?
is that a hard sell to be able to convince them?
No,
of
but,
the-
but you know,
or they accept it?
I think the way things were in the past, the way the delegation thought, they thought of things as which facility was in which senator's district. And so
Right.
this was always a Ken Laval University. And then even when John Flanagan, through redistricting, incorporated, this university became part of his Senate district, it was then maybe, it was still viewed as a Ken Laval's district or a John Flanagan's district, and that's the mindset they had, and other things were in this person's district. And so what we tried to do when we brought Todd here, and Ken and we took him on a tour of the Mart and other things, and he was really blown away by it, was to do exactly what Sam said. Emphasize, don't look at this as Ken Laval or John Flanagan asset. This is a Long Island asset. And it resonated. And
Good.
as Sam also said, Jimmy Gorin and Monica Martinez are alum, so that's good.
great.
And but we gotta keep on driving that home and get people to think of this as not just a statewide, but regional asset, and not just a local senator's district asset.
The other thing, we have a large number of both employees and students from Queens, and fully half of them come out of Toby Stavisky's district.
Oh,
So
sweet.
as we said to her, you actually are Stony Brook, and so, she got a lot of swag. But we've had some good conversations with her, we're going back to see her. And so, I think that we are doing, and really, Kevin, I'm gonna also thank you, because I think that we've been doing some very good conversations with the Long Island, not forgetting our current senators, who are also continue to be helpful, but really working with some of the others to understand what our needs are and what kind of an institution we are and what we bring to Long Island, to New York State.
So we have our work cut out for us. And then remind me again, so the state budget, state fiscal year starts April 1st. When does our fiscal year, are we calendar year, or do we?
June 30.
June 30? So it goes from July 1st to June 30? All right. So you have to have your budget in place for next year by July 1st? All right.
Right.
And so you'll brief us on that in May, and we'll know what happened by April 1st, so you can brief us in May.
Exactly.
Of any
Yeah.
direct impacts.
Sure.
Hey, just so unrelated to maybe your presentation, but I got some phone calls over the last 3 weeks from hospitals in Nassau County saying how much they fear the proposed introduction of a single-payer system in New York. And have we looked at, and there is a lot of political support for that. And I know the governor has not been, he's not made a commitment on that issue. It's coming from the legislature. Do we know what the ramifications of a single-payer system would be to our hospital, and would it be just as bad as the hospitals in Nassau County's concerns?
So it's really simple. On a Medicare patient, we lose 22 cents on the dollar. So if Medicare for all occurs and they keep the rates exactly the same, we'll be out of business. We'll be losing 22% on every patient who has Medicare for all. Very simple math there. Now, if they change the Medicare rate to adjust for what the real cost of service is, then that changes the math. But right now, we we get 78 cents of what it costs us to take care of a Medicare patient.
Okay, now that makes sense. And so when they talk about to fund the single payer, they'd have to raise revenues by $100 billion a year or whatever, and that's
It's all about the rates.
Yes, it's pretty significant. And then I had one other question, since the governor included it in the budget. If the decriminalization of marijuana, does that present new challenges for campuses? And you see some municipalities opting out of things. Is that something that we as a council will or could address?
So I can imagine there could be some things related to community standards or bylaws that would come. this is actually a great question that was raised at our last Senate meeting. We were putting together a small task force to kind of take a look and understand what the impact would be on us. I think, you know, it depends on kind of what's passed, and, you know, is it 21, is it 18? You know, things like that would obviously make a difference. And, you know, and I think we have to, we will come up with a policy, but part of it will be dependent on what laws actually pass.
Why wouldn't we treat it just like alcohol? They have an alcohol policy, we should just add that to the list.
I think that's probably how it will happen, but I think, again, what we'll do is, I think we'll take a look at what's happening in campuses like UW, for example, and other states where this has changed, to kind of understand what the impact has been. And from a legal point of view, you know, we can't, I doubt we would treat it any differently than we treat alcohol. I agree with you, depending on what law is passed. But I think, you know, again, I think it would be good to take a look at these other campuses and just kind of understand what's come up, because there may be unintended consequences of some of these things we haven't been aware of.
Well, we're already a smoke-free campus too, right?
that's what
So
I was
it
just
could- it
thinking.
could-
Yeah, people would not be smoking marijuana on campus,
Yeah.
but I imagine the edibles in most of these places are what's really taken off in terms of our campuses.
Citizen James, I'm sure, no, we've never seen anybody smoke marijuana on campus. No, not trying to put you on the spot. Not trying to put you on the spot.
Smoke free.
Smoke free, very good. All right, so thanks, Judy. Good presentation, and obviously a lot of things for us to be keeping our eye out for, you know, especially the budget. Next up, we have Richard Reeder, the Vice President of Research, who's going to talk to us about what Sam briefly shared with us, the changes with the economic development programs here at Stony Brook.
Thank you. So as President Stanley mentioned, at many research-intensive universities, it's quite common to have the economic development enterprise integrated and aligned with the research area. So what the President has outlined, I think, is a very natural progression of where we find ourselves today. And just to remind you, I know you're all very well aware of the value that we place on research here. To give you an idea of the scope, our total research and development expenditures across the university last year exceeded $240 million. And for several years, this has been growing, and we know that it's going to continue to grow. So bringing economic development into the research area, I think, is something that's really a tremendous opportunity, as the President has indicated. Now, where we are today, I'd like to give a lot of credit to Yakov Shamash. He's created the economic development enterprise that we have now. It's really very much the hub of activities, both locally and regionally, that tie us into industry and develop startups. So it's been very productive for us, and I think Yakov deserves a lot of credit for that. In fact, much of the very visible part of the economic impact that we have across the region has been largely guided by some of the activities coming out of Yakov's area. And it's also very clear that New York State has made significant investments here. If you look at the R&D park, we've got a really thriving enterprise there. And much of that was under the stewardship of Yakov. So I really do think we are in a strong position now to build on that going forward. And I think that's the vision that the President has really outlined. So if you think of some of the investments that we have now, most of you have been to the R&D park and you know that we have 2 centers of excellence. They're modern lab buildings, CWIT and the Advanced Energy Center. There is incubator space. We have academic researchers in there. We have core facilities to support people in there now. So that really represents a strong foundation. In addition, we have new building under construction and one that's in a design stage, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. So in addition to the 2 centers of excellence, we also have significant state investment in centers for advanced technology. We have 3 of them. I think we're the only SUNY institution with that many CATs at the moment. So we really do have a strong foundation. But this is the opportunity, as the President outlined, to try and align these resources with the goals that we have set for research. And there are a lot of areas now that we are investing in with new research initiatives. You heard earlier, one of these is artificial intelligence. We have a lot of expertise here on campus in that area. We've been engaged with SUNY and with other campuses around the state, and this is going to be a growth area for us. Related to that is quantum information science. This is emerging now as probably the next big thing out there. Funding agencies, federal funding agencies have indicated there will be probably a billion plus in terms of support to build up our expertise in quantum information science. Again, we are well positioned to take advantage of that in terms of our research initiatives. And I can go on. Engineering-driven medicine is another area we've decided to invest in, bringing together strong expertise that we have in engineering with all the things going on in the School of Medicine, including medical imaging, neuroscience, cancer research, something we're investing very strongly in now, aging in place. We can go on and on. These are new initiatives for us. We also have a lot of expertise in terms of energy technology. Energy storage is one of the areas in which we have great strength nationally and internationally. Many of the activities there are already going on in the R&D part. We also have a lot of interest in how we develop offshore wind. We have a recent award that's been made by NYSERDA, which will go over to the Energy Center, and this is going to fund a lot of research, not just at Stony Brook, but around the region, and we can capitalize on that. Connecting that energy to the grid, that represents a major challenge, but we have expertise in those areas. We partner with people at Brookhaven National Lab that put us in a unique position to be leaders in that area. So these are some of the aspirations that we have in terms of our research. So what we want to do as a strategy going forward is think about how we can use the foundation that has been built up in economic development and align these two. We should really be looking at the use of our facilities where we can strengthen the research here and in turn strengthen the connection locally. And that includes startups getting additional support from industry to help us in our research endeavors and to really maximize what we have in place right now. So just in a nutshell, I think that's the strategy that we've articulated going forward. Now, I mentioned incubators. I think I mentioned incubators. We've got world-class incubator space among a number of buildings in the Advanced Energy Center in Seawit, in the Long Island High Tech Incubator, the Innovation and Discovery Center. That's a new building that you have seen going up in the R&D park. It's nearing completion right now. It will be occupied by several companies as well as academic research labs. And this has been one of the keys that we have embraced in terms of these new buildings. You bring in companies and you put them next to our researchers. And those collisions that occur, it's been shown elsewhere, that leads to new ideas, it leads to new funding, and that's how a lot of these endeavors grow. And I think that's going to be key going forward. So as we look at the incubator space and we try and optimize its use, we're going to make sure that we have the right people in there, academic researchers along with the startups and the private companies that want to come in. You also know that we have funding for a new building, iDime, which is centered around engineering-driven medicine. We recently had a very interesting trip to the University of Pittsburgh to look at the McGowan Institute, which is the leader in regenerative medicine. Ken was on this visit along with a number of other people, and I think it really showed that there's tremendous opportunity in that area. Well, regenerative medicine is one of the science programs that we're going to be putting in the iDime building, along with neuroscience and advanced imaging and characterization, of which there will be a big component that is computational in nature. So we're going to have yet another building there to support the research and the economic development as we align these. So we're at very early stages. The announcement has been made only a week ago. We are working very closely with people in economic development to try and get a strategy to move forward. Very importantly, I have somebody to help in doing this. Peter Donnelly, who many of you already know, is the director of the Office of Tech Licensing and Industry Relations. He's also a leader in Accelerate Long Island. Pete is very well versed in this area. He knows a lot of the local community. He's been in the business ecosystem for a long time. He understands tech transfer. He understands how to approach industry, and those are all key qualities that we need in leadership going forward. So he will be an associate vice president for technology partnerships. He'll be reporting to me up through the office of the vice president for research. We are tentatively going to create 2 areas that will report up to him. This will be industry research partnerships and business support, and also incubator management and support. And this encompasses most of the activities that we have in the economic development area now. We will incorporate the individuals in economic development, make sure they're playing the right roles to support the vision. And that may mean that we actually redirect some of the efforts of certain individuals to make sure that we have a common goal that we're moving towards. So that's just in a nutshell where we're going. It's actually a very exciting time. I'm really energized by this. In addition to overseeing the research administration, I get the opportunity to see how we can build on that for the university, provide services to the local community, and also make sure that we're very effective in being a partner on Long Island and regionally and throughout the state. And that's really all I wanted to articulate at this time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rich. A great presentation. The update was very clear and helpful. Peter Donnelly, who Rich just mentioned, works out of my office a couple of days a week as he became the executive director of Accelerate Long Island when Mark Lesko left, and he's just been doing a phenomenal job. A real gentleman, really smart, and so he'll be a great asset, as he takes on a new role. And so just have to figure out how to transition him out of one and transition him into the other. He's a part-timer, for us. His main day job is the transfer tech agent for Stony Brook, but really good guy. So sounds like you already have a good team in place, and look forward to catching up with you more. Anybody have any questions, Rich?
Mentioning technology transfer. Sam, earlier when you were talking about research not, and I may have this wrong, not being a source of revenue, does the university get any revenue from tech transfer? I always thought it might.
It does, and it did even more in the past. So we had the interesting thing about tech transfer. I don't want to say it's a lottery, but it's very tough to hit major winners. So few institutions have had examples where they've actually had a drug or a device that really changed. Stony Brook did have such a winner a number of years ago. Worked by Barry Collar, identified a drug called RioPro, which was one of the first drugs used to treat heart attacks and the clots in the coronary arteries associated with that. And it was a very effective drug and went off patent a number of years ago. And now is actually running into production issues. So we continue to receive royalties from it. We're still receiving some royalties from its sales, but the dollars have actually gone down. We have a couple other things in the pipeline that could be successful. We'll have to see. Some of them are things that are licensed for something, but actually another use could be much more profitable if that turns out to work. And there's some preliminary data that was exciting last time I looked, but I haven't looked in a while. So I would say no huge sources of revenue from that, Jim, and it's really hard to plan for it because again, it's so far between that if you hit it, it's amazing. It can be transformational, but very few places hit it. WashU has never had that, I think, big score in terms of getting big drug. NYU has had a couple. It really varies from institution.
Well, that's what I'm taking from your comment, is the lack of certainty.
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
And out of the Accelerate Long Island initiative,
Yeah.
we funded, we administer these two different state grant programs. One was we were able to invest $50,000 into a company, and the second grant was $100,000 per company, and then they had to match that with 2-to-1 with non-state dollars. And several of those companies are emanated out of Stony Brook, and including one that is already attracted about $11 million in additional financing, private financing. Robert Coleman, who's now at the Broad Hollow Science Park with some type of virus immunization.
Yeah, I think this is the work that came out of Eckhard Wimmer's lab involving synthetic viruses as vaccine vectors, essentially.
So it's exciting, and we expect several of the companies that we're funding it to not make it, but we're hoping a couple of them do make it.
It's Codagen,
because-
right? We're talking
Yeah,
about-
Codagenics,
yeah,
yes.
Codagenics.
Yeah, so.
And some of them may kick off revenue back.
Yes. Well, on the second grant, the state is a partner in it, and so to the extent there are revenues to be made, the state will get it. And then maybe some of it will trickle to Stony Brook.
Yeah, it's possible.
It trickles out of the market.
And I'll just mention that a lot of times what we find is that our faculty don't understand the pathway to commercialization. And there are some models out there that are very interesting. One of them is to embed a tech transfer person into a very productive unit, and so that you have someone there, as opposed to being at a remote location that you don't know that they exist. And that individual embedded in a unit where it could be engineering, it could be in medicine, you can be driving those disclosures. And as the President pointed out, it's very difficult to predict when you get a hit. But by having more disclosures and making the individual investigators aware of the opportunities, you increase the chances for that. So it's something we're looking at
The
now.
person could be sort of a mentor to the.
Exactly.
Any other questions for Rich? Thank you, Rich. Does anybody have any new or additional business to raise?
I just wanted to ask about the Children's Hospital and what the status is of the opening.
Ken?
So construction has hit some snags. We just did not accept what they wanted to turn over to us. We set the bar high for quality of the facility. We have a revised completion schedule from the contractor. I'm hesitant to say a date because we've been burned on dates before, but it's not going, it'll be in this calendar year, let's put it that way. Probably early part of this
You
calendar.
gave us a great tour the last time, so it's exciting to
It is
see
very
the
exciting.
next
There's
step.
only two problems, air and water, but other than that.
No. Minor stuff.
Anybody else? Hearing none, I promised you we'd get out early today. So wish you all a quick spring, and we'll see you when on May, do we have a date? May what? May 6th. And so we'll see you then, and Rachel will send out information as to agenda and whereabouts. So thank you, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Jim.